Okay, since I can't be with you today, I thought I'd run over this little lesson on some of the simple transformation tasks that we have within Illustrator. And last week we talked about Pathfinder functions, and we kind of talked about symmetry and stuff, and I want your 50 shapes to have symmetry. So think about working off of either grids or working off a center point so that you can keep these things symmetrical. All right, so one thing I want you to do is to be able to rotate. So we're going to talk about the rotate button here. And all these things that we're talking about today, you need to set a pivot point. Okay, so if I wanted to rotate this circle, around this larger circle, I would hit the rotate button, which is over here in our tools, or R is the keyboard shortcut. So depending on where I want to rotate this I need to set a pivot point. So if I click out here and I drag, you'll see that that circle is going to rotate around that pivot point. Okay. So anywhere you click is going to set that pivot point. Now for me, what I want to do is I want to rotate this circle around the bigger circle. So where would my pivot point be? It would be dead center of my larger circle. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to click right there to set that pivot point, and then come out here and drag, and you'll see that my smaller circle is going to pivot around that larger circle. Okay, so that's rotate. Now we can also come in here, so we can set the pivot point and rotate it ourselves. And if I hold down Option, oops, so let me set my pivot point, and I'm going to click and drag, and if I hold down the Option key, I get to duplicate that. So if I set my pivot point here in the center, and I click and drag, and as I'm dragging I'm going to hold down Option, I get to duplicate. Another way that we can rotate, which is really the way you want to rotate it because you want to have some control over it, and that is to Option click. Remember, Option allows us to set that pivot point and bring up the dialog box. So now if I say rotate 335 degrees, or if I say rotate 19 degrees, 9 degrees, whatever you type in here. So if I say 5 degrees, and I'm doing this by the numbers, make sure you check this preview button, and we say copy. Now we've copied or duplicated a circle 5 degrees off to that side. Okay, so we have our circle. We hit R for rotate. Option allows us to set the pivot point right in the center, and it could be anywhere. We could Option click out here, but I want to rotate around this circle. By Option clicking in here, I'm setting the pivot point and bringing up this this dialog box to let me interact with this by the numbers. So let's say we want to go 24 degrees. We'll say copy. And then if we want to transform that, or if we want to move that again, we're going to go up under Object, Transform, and Transform again. And you see what the keyboard shortcut is. It's Command D. So if we hit Command D, Command D, Command D, we're going to create this symmetrical, and it happened to be properly aligned. Okay, so Command D, Command D, or Control D, Control D, Control D is what you want to use to transform again, transform again, transform again. Now another cool thing that we can do in Rotate is we can bring up our dialog box. That's Option, clicking, And we can actually come in here and use Illustrator as a calculator. So let's say we know that there's 360 degrees in a circle. And I wanted to say I told you I wanted to have 60 of these circles rotated around the outside. Well, I can come in here and type in 360 slash mark, which is the divide. What did I say, by 60? Let's just say by 65 circles. So we're going to have 65 circles. So 360 divided by 65. And Illustrator is going to do the math for us on that. So I'll say copy. And then I can say Command D, and you'll see that should give us 60. So you can see how you can create a unique shape, and it should come back right to be perfect. Okay, so Command D, Command D, Command D, Control D, Control D is the important part. And remember, we have to set that pivot point. And we need to make sure that things are lined up properly too. So remember our alignment buttons, we can say align so that's dead center. We could hit rotate, option click in the center. And if I wanted 12 of these, I could say 360 divided by 12. We'll say copy. And then I'd do Command D or Control D, and we can create this fun little shape. And where you're going to see this come into play is that we can use our Pathfinder functions. Let's say we created a crescent moon using our Pathfinder functions. Remember we talked about that? So if I go in here, Pathfinder, and say minus front, then we could move this here. Can rotate it. And then we could say R, rotate. There's our pivot point, but we want to set that to our center, so I'm going to option click. And we'll say 360 divided by about 40. So there's going to be 40 of these shapes revolving around that center. We'll say copy. And then we'll say Command D or Control D. And you'll see that you can get some very cool shapes just by duplicating. And then we will come in here and say, select all those. And we'll say unite. And that puts that into one final shape. And if you think about it, if you had to create this all in with a pen tool, it might be kind of complicated. So there's kind of the start of a cool logo. I'm not sure that you could envision that, but we could certainly try to envision that using our simple basic functions. Alright, so play around with that. That'd be a cool way for you to get some cool 50 shapes for your project. And we'll move on to some different little transformations. Alright, see ya.